About 5 years ago, my mom started dating a guy she met on a dating site. That part is fine. I had recently started dating the woman who would later become my wife, and we had met online. I'll just refer to her as my wife for this story. Anyway, my wife and I never really liked this guy. We didn't think he was mean or anything like that, just a little creepy. He was quiet, he kept his eyes closed a lot, and occasionally said odd things like offering my wife a chocolate and then popping one in his mouth, closing his eyes, and moaning as he let it melt in his mouth. One time my wife and I were visiting my mom, but she got called into work, so we waited at her house. Her boyfriend was over, but he spent the entire several hours just hanging out in her bedroom with the door closed. Just before Christmas, my mom and this guy started having some difficulties. My wife and I were visiting her for the holidays, and she dropped all of her problems on us. We listened carefully and told her our opinions, suggesting that she would be better off without him. She already had her mind made up, though, and decided to break up with him on Christmas Eve. We spent the night at my mom's and got up early on Christmas morning to visit my dad at his house. We didn't plan to spend the night at my dad's, but we got snowed in, which was actually a nice Christmas surprise. The next day, we left as soon as we could get through the snow, and my wife suggested that we stop by my mom's house on the way so that we could see if she was okay. My wife just had a really bad feeling about my mom's now ex-boyfriend. My mom's car was in the driveway, but that didn't mean much because she lives close enough to work that she often walks, and it hadn't snowed in her town. She also never locks her door, which drives me crazy, so we let ourselves in. That's when we saw blood oozing out of the refrigerator's water dispenser. It had filled up the spill container and was leaking onto the floor, making a puddle. My wife screamed, and I freaked out. I fully expected to see my mom's head in the freezer. I nervously opened the freezer to find a bag of frozen cherries that had been opened, crammed into the freezer so that it fell onto the ice dispenser and melted. The relief was overwhelming, but the shock of the moment lingered. We cleaned up the mess and called my mom to check on her. She was fine and at work, completely unaware of the scare we had just experienced. We told her about the incident, and she laughed it off, but my wife and I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. A few days later, my mom mentioned that her ex-boyfriend had been trying to contact her, leaving strange messages and showing up at her workplace. She was starting to feel uncomfortable and decided to report it to the police. They advised her to get a restraining order, which she did. Despite the restraining order, the ex-boyfriend continued to lurk around. My mom became increasingly paranoid, double-checking locks and looking over her shoulder. My wife and I visited more often to keep her company and ensure she felt safe. One evening, while we were all having dinner in my mom's house, we heard a noise coming from the backyard. My mom's face went pale, and my wife and I exchanged worried glances. We cautiously went to investigate, armed with a flashlight and a sense of dread. As we approached the backyard, we saw a shadowy figure near the fence. My wife shone the flashlight on him, and it was the ex-boyfriend. He looked disheveled and agitated. We yelled at him to leave, and he muttered something under his breath before stumbling away into the night. We called the police again, and they arrived quickly. They took our statements and assured us they would keep an eye on the area. My mom was visibly shaken, and we decided to stay the night to make sure she felt safe. The next morning, we found a note taped to the front door. It was from the ex-boyfriend, filled with ramblings about how he couldn't live without my mom and how he would do anything to be with her. It was clear that he was unstable, and we knew we had to take further action. We installed security cameras around my mom's house and made sure she always had her phone with her. The police increased their patrols in the neighborhood, and we hoped that the ex-boyfriend would eventually give up and move on. Over time, the sightings of the ex-boyfriend became less frequent, and my mom started to feel more at ease. The security measures we put in place helped her regain a sense of safety and normalcy. My wife and I continued to visit regularly, and we all tried to move past the unsettling events. Looking back, the experience was a stark reminder of how quickly things can take a dark turn. It taught us the importance of being vigilant and trusting our instincts. While the fear has faded, the lessons we learned have stayed with us, making us more cautious and aware of the potential dangers around us. Back in the early 90s, I was around 6 or 7 years old, living in a small town in Oregon. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other. I was at home with my older brother, who was about 14 at the time. Our parents often let him babysit me because we got along well despite the age gap. It was around 8 p.m. on a cold winter night. The darkness outside made it feel even colder. We were in the living room, which was our favorite spot because that's where the TV was. We were watching one of those crime investigation shows, something like 60 Minutes or 48 Hours. The episode was about a quiet guy who went on a rampage in his neighbor's house, killing them and kidnapping their young daughter. Our living room had a large sliding glass door that led to the backyard, and a front door with a small entryway on the opposite side of the room. The front door was solid, but it had a glass storm door outside of it. Both doors made us feel a bit exposed, especially at night. About 45 minutes into the show, just as they were discussing the ongoing manhunt for the suspect, we heard a loud bang on the front door. We jumped up, terrified, and screamed. There was dead silence after that. The only lights on in the house were the kitchen light down the hall and the TV light in the living room. We initially thought something might have blown against the door. The winds in Oregon could be pretty strong. After a minute or two of silence, just as we were starting to calm down, we heard the storm door on the front door close. This meant someone had to have opened it to bang on the front door. My brother and I were frozen in place. He crawled over to the TV and turned it off with a loud click, plunging us into near darkness, with only the distant kitchen light providing any illumination. We kept making eye contact, then looking at the front door, unsure of what to do. I remember turning around to look at the glass door that led to the backyard. Just then, we heard the back door knob turn. It was locked on the knob, but not deadbolt. It rattled slightly as if someone was gently trying the handle. We held our breath, not making a sound. Suddenly, there was a loud bang as someone tried to force the door open, jerking it back and forth. The whole wall of windows shook violently. My brother panicked and screamed. He grabbed me and dragged me into his bedroom, slamming the door and barricading it with anything he could find, including his mattress. Fortunately, he remembered the portable phone, one of those heavy beige ones with a long metal antenna. In his panic, he couldn't remember the sheriff's number, so he hit redial. It connected to one of his friends, and he frantically told them that someone was trying to break into our house and to get help immediately. I was curled up on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. We didn't hear anything else until we saw headlights approaching our house. It was my brother's friend and his parents coming to check on us. They quickly assessed the situation and reassured us that we were safe. The police arrived shortly after, and they checked the perimeter of the house. They didn't find any signs of forced entry, but they did find some scuff marks on the back door. It was unclear if those marks were new or if they had been there for a while. Despite their thorough search, they couldn't find any evidence of an intruder. The police advised us to stay alert and keep all doors and windows locked. For the next few weeks, my brother and I were on edge. Every little noise would make us jump, and we were constantly checking the locks. Our parents were equally concerned and took extra precautions to ensure our safety. They installed additional locks and even set up a makeshift alarm system using bells and strings. One night, about a month after the incident, we heard a noise outside the house. My brother and I froze, our minds immediately flashing back to that terrifying night. My brother quietly peeked through the window and saw a figure moving near the backyard. He quickly called our parents, who were in the next room. They came in and immediately called the police. The police arrived quickly and apprehended a man who had been lurking around our property. It turned out he was a drifter with a history of breaking and entering. He had been in the area for a few weeks and had likely been the one trying to break into our house that night. The police took him away, and our sense of security slowly began to return. Over time, the fear and anxiety from that night faded, but the lessons we learned stayed with us. We never forgot to lock the doors and windows, and we became more aware of our surroundings. My brother and I grew closer because of the experience, and we often talked about how we handled the situation together. 4 years ago, I was wrapping up my freshman year at college. I had a great roommate, and overall, it was a fantastic year. Toward the end of my last semester, however, something felt different in my dorm hallway. While we were still our lively selves, there was a massive sense of dread that greeted me each time I entered the dorms. We chalked it up to the stress of impending finals, but it felt off. One night, after studying, I decided to shower to refresh myself before class in a few hours. Before I go on, let me describe the layout. Our hallway was one of many on a single floor. Each hall had 4 rooms for 2 people each, or a single room for the RAs. The hallways had massive steel doors with small windows at one end, and across from those was the bathroom. It felt like a prison block rather than living quarters for students. The bathroom had 2 sets of sinks, with 2 sinks on each side and large mirrors facing each other, creating that infinite mirror effect. Past the sinks, there were 2 urinals and a toilet stall on the left and 2 shower stalls on the right. If you stood at the left sinks, you could see into the showers through the mirror if the stall door was open. The bathroom door was identical to the hall doors, a steel frame with a small window that didn't provide much of a view for privacy reasons. The door was propped open with a wooden wedge that took effort to move. Now, back to the story. I was alone in the bathroom, preparing to shower. I put my change of clothes on the right sink so I could reach around and grab them. As I set my stuff down and looked up, I saw something shimmering in the distance inside the shower stall. It seemed to get closer, almost like it was jumping from one mirror layer to the next. I was unsettled but blamed it on the effects of Red Bull, Adderall, and caffeine. But it started moving faster. As it got closer, I could make out details. It was a dark mass that looked like it was covered in hair. By then, I was freaking out because this thing was getting closer in the mirror, and I was frozen in place. When it reached the 4th layer, I got a clear look. I regretted it instantly. It wasn't hair, but a long, flowing veil. You could partially see through it, but from the torso down, it was solid black. The face was human, yet so far removed. Eyes black and somehow glowing. I saw this for maybe a second before the lights cut out, and I heard the door slam. The bathroom went pitch black. I couldn't see the thing anymore. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Then an intense smell of blood hit me, and that's all I remember. I woke up in the hospital. My RA found me in a shower stall with a bloody shirt from a massive nosebleed. When he asked me what happened, all I could say was it saw me, and then I started freaking out. He called an ambulance, and they took me to the hospital, where they had to sedate me to calm me down. When I woke up, my parents were there, worried sick. They told me that the doctors believed I had a seizure, but CAT scans showed no sign of one. Epilepsy doesn't run in my family, and I'd taken Adderall many times without hallucinations or seizures. This experience left me with a lingering fear of mirrors. I can't look into one for more than a minute, and being in a room with one for too long causes me to break down. I've been in therapy for 3 years because of this. Religious leaders I've consulted don't recognize the pattern as demonic or evil, and there haven't been any reports of similar incidents in those dorms before or since. Since that night, I've been haunted by this experience. Nights are the worst. Shadows become menacing. Despite therapy, the trauma lingers. My friends and family try to help, but their concern often deepens my sense of alienation. Simple tasks like brushing my teeth or passing by reflective surfaces now fill me with dread. I've tried rationalizing it. Maybe it was just a perfect storm of stress, sleep deprivation, and stimulants. Yet, no matter how hard I try, the memory remains vivid and terrifying. My therapist suggests grounding techniques, which help to an extent, but there are times when nothing can keep the fear at bay. I've adopted various coping mechanisms. Journaling has been a lifesaver, allowing me to process my thoughts and emotions. I document everything, the good days, the setbacks, the nightmares. It's my way of maintaining a semblance of control over an otherwise chaotic mind. Despite these efforts, some nights are unbearable. I often wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, and find myself staring into the darkness, fearing it might stare back. My dreams are filled with that dark, shimmering figure and its glowing eyes. It's as if it's still watching me, waiting for a moment of vulnerability. Social situations have become challenging. I avoid places with large mirrors, which has made outings with friends awkward. They've been understanding, but I can see the confusion and pity in their eyes. It's a lonely existence, constantly battling an invisible enemy. Despite everything, I try to hold on to hope. Each day is a step toward healing, no matter how small. I cling to the thought that one day, this terror will release its grip on me. Until then, I take it one day at a time, celebrating minor victories and finding solace in the support of those who care for me. Reflecting on this experience, I realize that while it has profoundly impacted me, it has also revealed my resilience. I'm stronger than I give myself credit for, and each day I manage to face the world is a testament to that strength. This journey is far from over, but I'm determined to keep moving forward, no matter how daunting the path may be.